West Tigers podcast. It's episode number 349. Good start. 345. Joined by Gary. And we've gone to the interchange bench again. Joined by Nick. You were going to say, Gary.
Look, I have to say, since Nick's last appearance on the podcast, I've been inundated with emails, messages, every day asking for Nick to make a return. The sad part is they've all been from Nick. So Nick has been bombarding me trying to get back on.
Well, I think it's your third appearance, Nick. Is there a player you'd compare yourself to, like a Latu Fainu being injected off the bench, or
Peter Godinett?
Not Peter Godinett again. You know what, Latu Fainu, I'd like to say I've probably got some of his skills, but we haven't really seen him yet. So maybe I'm a Latu Fainu. Need a few more opportunities.
He's the new Matt Ballon.
Okay. Well, Matt Ballon only played one game, so he's already gone past Matt. Might have played two. He's already gone past Matt Ballon. But boys, we'll talk very briefly about that shocking night last Friday night, because I believe only Joel and Steve did a special edition Doomsday Saturday night podcast. But Gary, did you have one word for that big loss at Shark Park?
Unacceptable. I think a lot of the effort from a large number of our players on Saturday night, and mainly our senior players, wasn't to an NRL standard. It wasn't acceptable. And I think they let themselves down. They let the team down. They let the fan base down. That's the most disappointing part for me, was the lack of effort that the side showed last week.
Your word, Nick?
Well, from a fan's perspective, from a personal point of view, it was traumatic. Just sitting there watching that entire performance, it was like, flashback to some of the horrors from last season. And to be honest, I think it was probably the first time I was on this pod, when I had the honour to be on the pod. I did say that I was afraid that the bubble was going to burst with all the effort that we were putting in. And Jordan kind of talked us out of it and said we were going to win 3 straight. Well, sorry,
and then
Jordan,
we won 2, so we got partway there.
We won 2, and then we flopped. And I just have this horrible feeling that the flop's going to continue. But, we'll see what happens this week.
Sort of last 3 weeks, Gary, 40, 40, 58. So, I mean, the defensive bubble has certainly burst.
Yeah, the defense on the weekend was really, really poor. The big part for me was we had guys missing tackles who weren't even turning around and chasing. And that was the most disappointing thing to come out of last weekend for me, is if you miss a tackle in rugby league, the desire should be there to make up for your mistake. And I didn't see that from certain players last weekend, and that's what was most disappointing for me.
It was a very, very quick press conference with Benji, Nick, but he sort of said this was the first time this year that, they'd been blown off the park. I half agreed, because there was that game against St George, but I guess they were leading that at halftime. Do you think this is the first time from the opening bell where they just didn't look like they wanted to be there?
Sadly, yes. The effort from the get-go was horrible. When did they score last week? In like the second minute, it was quick. The first try, and
Stefano missing that tackle. I think it was in the first set of 6 they had, where Atkinson went straight through the middle.
Correct. We started with zero intensity, and that continued through the whole game. Yeah, some of those defensive efforts were just like coat hangers, just arms hanging out the side and players running straight through the middle. The commitment was horrible. And how they back up after that remains to be seen. But this week's going to be very interesting to see what we turn up with.
How do you deal with those sort of games, Gary? As a fan, what's your main emotion? Do you still get angry when you see stuff like that, or are you more just deflated, or numb to it by now? I got the feeling you were a bit angry Friday night.
Yeah, and you know me fairly well. I'm a guy who usually stays fairly positive. I try to stay fairly level in how I feel after games like that. Yeah, just like you, Eddie. You're like, it's almost the mirror. But I did turn into you on Friday night. I was not happy at all. Yeah, I was ranting. If anyone saw our group chat, I was not happy, which is unlike me. And to me, it comes back to what I spoke about with my one word. It comes all back to effort. It was much worse than the Roosters game. We went out against the Roosters and they were much better than us. They've got a much better squad, and they just overpowered us, and their class was too good for what we had. I can't sit here and say that there wasn't effort in that game, because there was. We just played a far better squad. The problem last week wasn't that we were playing a far better squad. I think Cronulla, with the side that they had on paper, they were beatable. Now, they came out fired up and were running hard and really shocked us when they came out. But for me, what made me angry was our players not engaging in the game, not putting in the effort that you need to see from NRL players. And that lack of effort's really what made me cranky, because that's something we haven't seen from this squad this year. I don't think. I think the effort's been pretty good across the park, but it was so poor last week, and it just took me back to what we were seeing at the end of the last 2 years.
Do you think, and maybe it's not right to say it about our team, but do you think we expected an easier game? Because I know Sharks hadn't been playing all that well, right?
I think Steve or Joel mentioned it on the review podcast that, there was possibly not, you can't be complacent when you're coming last, but they might have seen the fact that, Nico Hines was out and I think Talakai was out, and the fact they'd been out of form. I think they'd lost 5 of their last 6, but I just think it's that, Gary, I was listening to a podcast with Mitchell Pearce, and he's actually, as much as I didn't like him as a player, quite a good analyst, the way he looks at the sort of the game. And he was just saying, if you don't have a defensive mentality as a club, it's very hard to perform week to week. And he just said the Tigers, he was quite scathing. He said they just don't look like a connected football club. And I suppose he was comparing it a little bit with St George and Canterbury and what they've done this year. Even though they don't have the best rosters, they've sort of taken in that defensive mindset. And I think that's where, the cracks are starting to sort of appear now.
Yeah, I thought we were really strong early in the season defensively. I thought our structures were really, really spot on. But I think since the kind of news of players being shopped around and players not being wanted, that kind of dissolves your team harmony, and you really need to be working together as a team in defence. And I think that news that some senior players may not be at the club or are not wanted at the club, I think that's probably had a little bit of an impact on that over the past month. So I don't know how you fix that, because we're a side that's coming last. Like we're last on the table, and we need to make changes to our squad. But once you start talking about making those changes and it's out in the press and the players are hearing about it and players' managers are being told that the players no longer wanted at the club, it becomes really difficult to keep that team working together and going in the same direction. And I think that's where we're at now, and it makes me really worried for the rest of the season, because this is a team that should get more wins than what we've got in the last 2 years. Even at this point, we're probably ahead of where we were this time last year wins-wise. But if we can't get this team working together and performing together, I don't see where that next win comes from.
Would have been an interesting sort of week, Nick, to be a fly on the wall at Concord. I mean, Benji, he's kept a pretty calm persona all year in the media, and I respect that. I quite like that. But I imagine there would have been a few heart-to-hearts, one-on-ones, or perhaps just with the senior guys, because there were some senior guys out there on Friday night that, if they're going to put in efforts like that, what do you expect, of the young guys,
Yeah, exactly right. I think it'd be an interesting place to be a fly on the wall at any time of the year inside the walls at Concord.
So you want Tiger Town season 2?
You know what? No, I couldn't sit through it, and I couldn't even watch the end of that first series, to be honest, or the only series. Hopefully it is the only series. Again, I'll come back to the word traumatic. It just brings up too many painful memories. But speaking of the unrest at the club, it kind of started in the preseason, even before preseason last season, when we let Brooksy go and we didn't have any halves. And even throwing together a bunch of halves like, Sullivan and then Caesar and Fainu, that was very late in the piece. Sheens was sacked into the very back end of last season, so Benji was thrown in the deep end. Then we had the board, pulled apart and off the back of the review, which was brilliant, and we needed that. But everything's just kind of happened. It's almost like knee-jerk reactions, or it's happened very quickly. I just don't think the place has had time to settle. This season just feels very flustered to me. So I think, I don't know, the waters need to settle a bit, but I think we honestly just need to get through the end of this year as well as we can and as healthy as we can. I don't know how we can do that as a team.
Fair points. I think a lot of Tigers fans would very happily fast forward 8 or 9 months to March next year and get a little bit of optimism back. But we're going to obviously preview the Rabbitohs game a little bit later, and we'll talk about some of the changes or lack of changes that Benji's made. We'll do some buy, sell, hold, Gary. But first, a little bit of news. Not confirmed by the club yet, but it seems like by mutual consent, Robbie Farah will leave as assistant coach at the end of the year. We've sort of been talking about this probably for about the last 6 weeks, probably the lack of balance and definitely the lack of experience on the coaching staff. You wouldn't have been overly surprised, I guess, by this news?
Not surprised at all. I think it's the right direction for the club to go. And that's not trying to take anything away from Robbie Farah. I'm sure his heart and his intentions are in the right place. But for a young, inexperienced coach like Benji Marshall is, I just think he needs more experience around him. And I don't know how committed Robbie Farah is in that role. And from the article, it sounds like he's fairly relieved to not have that role moving forward. So it's quite possibly is best for both parties.
Do you really think it was a Benji decision, Gary, or do you think it was more Richo saying, look, it's not quite working, or just mutual?
Honestly, I don't care whose decision it was. I don't care how it came about. I think it's the right decision. It quite possibly has come from Richo, and if it has, that just fills me with more confidence about him moving forward, because we need to get more experience in there. And what's really important now is who we replace him with. It needs to be someone. It doesn't matter if it's a lot of experience as an assistant coach, but it needs to be someone who has a lot of experience behind them, because we've got a guy as our head coach who didn't even have a full season as an assistant coach before he was the NRL head coach. So he needs a lot more support, and that's what I'm hopeful to see in an announcement sometime between now and then end of the year, someone very experienced coming in to help him out.
I agree with you, Gary. I'm just wondering, with Robbie in that assistant role, did he have a contractual term that he was supposed to?
It was 2 years, but I'm not sure exactly the makeup of it. I know he came alongside Benji, and I think originally Benji was meant to take over the start of 25, Gary, and I think it was put down that Farah would be, Sheens and Marshall would be the assistants for 2 years, and then there'd be a decision made on Farah. I guess they've just brought that forward, but I don't think he was contracted for next year.
Okay. I don't believe so.
Yeah, I personally, I don't think he'd probably want to be around. He just looks, we all know what he was like as a player. He
was my favourite player, but he was known in the Tigers sort of circles for carrying losses around for 3 or 4 days. Didn't want to talk to anyone. I loved him because he was such a competitor on the field.
And he's just like you. You won't talk to anyone for 3 days after a loss either.
Exactly, but I mentioned to Gary just off air before. I saw him at the before the Titans game, and he was out there watching the reserve grade, as most of the squad were, and most of the squad were mingling and laughing and chatting, and he was just sort of sitting there on his phone for 45 minutes. Just looked a little bit, not disinterested, but he looked over it, and I saw that word relieved, and it sort of didn't surprise me, because it didn't strike me as a budding sort of potential head coach, Gary, just the way he carried himself through his career. He took losses very hard.
I do like how you said, you mentioned it to me off air. I was standing next to you while that was happening during the reserve grade game at that game. What, you forgot I was there?
I never forget you're there, Gary. It's very hard to forget when you're there, but
I do agree with you, mate. I think I don't think it's a role that really suits his personality. I remember going to fan days after losses, and you could barely get 2 words out of him because he was just taking it that poorly or that hard, which is a great thing as a player, but I don't know if that's the right attitude as a coach. I don't know how you allow your team to move on after a bad loss if you're as dirty as he is when the club loses.
Is that change enough, Nick, as far as if we're looking at a 2025 coaching team? Obviously, John Morris is there, apparently in charge of the defence, and Chris Hyington is there. I'm not sure what his official role is. I guess he's just one of the assistant coaches, probably more of a motivator and trying to keep morale up. But I personally look at that, and I like John Morris. In fact, he's had some head coaching experience and apparently looking after the defence. I know it hasn't been good the last couple of weeks, but I'd probably go a step further. And I've got nothing against Chris Ironton, another club legend like Robbie Farah, but I think we could possibly do with another assistant there with a little bit more coaching years behind them.
You're probably right. I don't look too hard or too closely into other clubs, but how many assistant coaches do teams usually have?
Well, it's generally at least an attack and defence coach and maybe one other. But like my thing, Gary, is like I don't have a problem with Robbie Farah or Chris Ironton sort of helping out Benji, but I would have liked them almost to, one of them maybe take charge of the 20s or the reserve grade or the flag or something and work your way up the chain rather than going straight into a coaching team that was, they all played together, those guys, and they're all mates. And obviously trust is a big factor. And I didn't have a problem originally with Benji getting to select his coaching team because I believe if you're going to go all in with someone, you've got to let them pick their staff. But I think in hindsight, it was probably a mistake to go for such a young star.
Yeah, and when you have a look at it, we've got a guy in an interim role in that general manager of football role in Matthew Betsy as well. He doesn't have experience in that role, so he doesn't have experience as a coach either. So that direct person above Benji is also not that experienced as well. So I just don't think there's enough help there for him at the moment. And that's no slight on anyone who's involved in those roles at the moment. I just think he needs a little bit more help and a little bit more support. And what you want to do is you want to set him up to have the best chance for success. Now, going into a head coaching role when you've had about, 6 months of an assistant coaching role, he didn't have a full season in that role, you're setting a guy up in a position to fail. And then when you don't have a lot of support around him, you're not scaffolding that success. And I think that's what's really important. I think that's what Richo will be looking at, is putting the scaffolding around Benji Marshall to ensure that he can transition into this role. Because he's a year into his coaching career and in the toughest job in the NRL, a side that's lining up for its third wooden spoon, and we've got the rawest of raw coaches. So as much experience as we can get in there, the better.
Benji is raw. How much do the stories of Benji not going to watch reserve grade and lower grades worry you guys? What's your thoughts?
He was there last weekend. So he needs to be getting out to games. He needs to be out at those reserve grade games, wherever it works. There's going to be times where there's conflicts and he can't get there. There's going to be times where it doesn't work when first grade's playing or they're out of Sydney. Those sort of things I understand. And it's not so much about getting that opportunity to see them play, because I'm sure there's video on it and you can watch the video. It's about letting those players who are playing reserve grade know that there's a genuine pathway there and that head coach is actively watching them play and supporting what they do. And that's the issue I have if he hasn't been attending games, which is what we've been hearing earlier in the season. But I do know he was out at the game last weekend, and that needs to continue.
Agreed.
Well, Gary as well, so maybe it made a difference to the morale of the players.
Well, it makes a huge difference when you look up as a player, when you look up and you know, because every one of those players wants to be playing in the NRL. They want to be playing in that first grade side. And if you're going along to games and the head coach of the NRL side hasn't even bothered to come and watch you play, that sends a message, and it's not the right message we want to be sending.
I think Wayne Bennett could get away with it just because he's got so many runs on the board. But if you're in your first year of coaching, I agree. You want to be getting out to as many games as possible. Nick, is there an ideal candidate off the top of your head that comes to mind? I mean, I just think, yes, I'd like Brad Arthur, but I'd like Brad Arthur to be the head coach personally. But is it sort of an attractive role for an assistant? Because they probably, some guys who might have been head coaches or sacked head coaches or assistant coaches for years, they might look at it and go, well, I've got more experience than this guy. Why should I be his assistant? Or they might look at it like, well, I don't want to be cynical, but in a year or two, Benji could be out the door if we don't perform, and they could be the head coach then.
Yeah, exactly right. I guess John Morris is probably sitting in that passenger seat at the moment, isn't he? So if anything did happen, imagine if we 0 from 12 next season, is Benji likely going to stay on? And if he's shown the door, John's going to slip straight into that role. But yeah, there's candidates around. I saw on X today, someone tweeted Jason Demetriou as a possibility with maybe Benji's, Rabbitohs link. He's had some time with him in the past. Brad, after when he was sacked from Para, I thought the same thing, Eddie. I think I posted it in your podcast Facebook group that he would be an ideal candidate, and I kind of tongue in cheek at the time said he might even be able to lure across someone like Mitchell Moses out of his contract and across to us. But there's a few options. I don't know which one's the right one though.
For me, one thing we do want to avoid is what that second part you just said, Eddie. I don't want a guy coming here with his eyes on the top job. If we've got an experienced guy coming here, it has to be to support Benji Marshall in becoming the best coach he can. The last thing that we want is someone white-handing him or someone not being fully committed because they can see the position opening up for themselves. So it's really crucial. I want someone who's very experienced. Doesn't necessarily have to be NRL head coaching experience, but I want someone really experienced who's here to support Benji Marshall, not someone who's got eyes on his job.
I really agree with you, Gary. I think Benji has already proven in his very short term at the Tigers that he can be a great mentor to players, especially younger players that have looked up to him throughout his playing career. If he had someone with a lot of experience, maybe a bit older, beside him doing a lot of the dirty work, and that includes going out to lower grades, whether it's reserves or SG ball or whatever. And I kind of want to say it. Imagine if Tim Sheens was around doing that dirty work for him. But someone of that stature, that could really benefit Benji's, career advancement going forward.
Funny, you mentioned Tim Sheens there, Nick. That I mean, Gary, like, should we just stuck solid with that plan for 2 years, because we do have Jerome Luai arriving next year, and Benji would have had, not copping any of these beatings now. Will we again quick to pull the trigger? I know Tim Sheens wasn't doing any better, but that original plan, the 2 years an assistant, would that have served him better than putting him straight in 24?
I think any extra experience you could have got him would have been beneficial. Though our results weren't great last year with Tim Sheens in that role, and I can understand why the club made the move to end that experiment. But it was just that was just another sign of our club changing direction willy-nilly. You put this plan in place, and that's a big thing Richo keeps coming out and saying is, this is our plan. We're going to stick to this plan. I think it's probably put Benji in a harder spot, the fact that we changed that plan last year. At least if this year had gone the way it has and Tim Sheens was coaching, Benji would have been shielded from that a little bit, and he would have been coming in next year to start afresh with Jerome Luai, as you said, coming into the squad. And that probably would have set him up for a better position. But I guess we're just got to make the most of it now. We're in the position we're in, and hopefully we have a similar situation that the Bulldogs had last year, where Geraldo had quite a difficult year, and there were people talking about that he couldn't coach and he wasn't going to make it.
That could be one of the positives, I guess, is that it's a common sort of saying, you don't know your head coach until you've lost 5 or 6 in a row. Benji's already
lost 8.
Serraldo had
was it?
Yeah, it was bad. But Serraldo lost. He had a shocking first year. He obviously had a lot more experience as an assistant coach and whatnot. But at least next year, he's going to be. He's been thrown into the fire, and some of those experiences, even though they've been negative at times this year, he might be able to use to his advantage next year.
Well, and there is a lot of things he's experienced for the first time this year. Even running that complete off-season and the pre-season last year by himself, I guess he would have learnt a lot from that, and there's maybe things he'll do different next year and things he'll prepare differently. My biggest concern with his coaching at the moment is team selections and bench rotations. I think he's really struggling in that area. So maybe someone who can help with that a little bit, because I think he's got a lot to learn in that area. But I don't know. I don't know who we're going to get into that role. As I said, doesn't matter if it's NRL experience. They just have to be experienced, and I'll be happy to move forward with that.
Nick, just random question to finish off talking about Benji. What percentage chance he either walks away at the end of the year or is sacked before the start of 2025?
0. I don't
0.
think. Yeah,
No,
he's not. He's
I
not
was
going.
going to say 5%, Gary, because I just think, he did say there was a quote. I can't remember exactly what it was, but they asked him, how's it been? He said, it's been a lot harder than I thought. And then he tracked back a bit. He said, I shouldn't phrase it like that. He said, it's just been everything that I thought, plus a bit of GST. What percentage do you say that he just walks away at the end of the year?
Look, I don't see him walking away. I don't think that's a decision he's going to make. I I think he really loves the man management side of being a coach. I think that's something that really appeals to him. And you can't get that anywhere else. You can't get that being in the media. This is his only opportunity for that. And if he walks away from a coaching role now, he has no chance of coaching again in the future. If this coaching stint doesn't work out, even if he gets sacked, I don't see him going to another club and being a head coach. So it really does come down to how much this means to him. And I think the fact that the end of last year he gave up all his media commitments to do this, I think this is what he does want to do. And especially that man management side of it, I think really appeals to him. So I don't see him walking away.
Do you think Benji's finding it harder at the moment than what he thought it might be?
I'm sure he is.
Yeah, I especially the media and the results side of it, I think he's finding it harder. I would still think the type of person he is, he's really loving that day-to-day interaction with the players and trying to motivate the players. I think he's probably liking that part. But the results, I think he would be finding hard, and that media scrutiny that is constantly there. I don't know if he expected that to be so as strong as it has been.
I was sort of thinking, even Nick, like a lot of the great coaches, they're often like the journeyman players, like the Bellamy's or Bennett's or Trent Robinsons, didn't have great careers, so they're probably used to like those sort of setbacks. Whereas Benji, like, what has he ever lost at in his life? Like, he came through as a school kid playing first grade when he's 17, won a grand final in his first year. I know the Tigers had some down years when he played, but they weren't getting wooden spoons. So I think that's probably something that's hard for him to deal with. He's had success his whole life, even that silly game show or whatever, the Celebrity Apprentice. He went,
apart from his stint in rugby.
That didn't go too well, but he got out of that quick smart. He quit that after a month or two. So
maybe he will walk away, Eddie.
I said 5%. I don't want him to walk away. I don't wish bad on him, but it's always a chance. Nick, this is my favourite segment because it's my segment. Buy, sell, and hold.
Nick doesn't think this is as good as my segments that I run those.
Well, you're allowed, because you're first time playing this game, Nick. I'll let you have one hold if you need to hold something. I've got about 5 or 6 questions. First one, I'll go to you, Nick. Last night was one of the all-time great Origin games. Buy or sell?
Buy, 100%. And I actually, you know what? My wife doesn't watch much footy. She's kind of been scarred like my children have been with me sitting on the lounge over the years and going to games and coming home after another loss and just doesn't want to know anything about it. But she sat on the lounge and watched that entire Origin game last night. And for someone that's not engaged in the sport to sit there for 80 minutes plus the 10, 15-minute, whatever it is, half-time break and watch the entire thing and make comments about, how good the play was, how brutal it was, how intense the match was. It was just a fantastic spectacle. Obviously, being a Blues supporter, and we don't have haven't had much joy over the years, and also off the back of being a Tigers fan with a lot of losses, it's just so nice to experience something, as joyful as last night.
Yeah, one of the best games of football I've seen in the last 10 years. The big thing for me was the intensity of that game. It had that Origin intensity of old. Like, I know it didn't get to the point where punches were thrown and that kind of historic part of it. But even that melee that went over the sideline, like we see players grabbing and pushing each other all the time now, and it comes across a bit weak. But even that felt like it had some intensity about it. And I don't think we've had that in rugby league for a while, that since they've kind of taken a fight out of the fighting out of the game, that real animosity and intensity in a game. And that was just running the entire game last night. I thought that was fantastic. And yeah, it's that Origin intensity that I think we've missed in the last 10 to 15 years.
No, I agree. And I I've said a couple of times, Gary, I don't really care about Origin, but that was like one of the few times I thought every player on the field there is giving absolutely everything. And it's such a high stakes game that one mistake could have lost it sort of either way. Let's go to question 2, Gary, around Origin as well. Michael Maguire is in the ideal role as an Origin coach rather than a club coach. Buy or sell?
Yeah, I buy that 100%. We chatted about this last night. I think a role where he has a short amount of time with the players, that 2-month period that Origin kind of goes for, I think is perfect for him. I think at times his intensity burns players out a little bit. And I think he gets the squad that he needs. My biggest knock on Michael Maguire while he was at our club was his inability to adjust his coaching to the squad that we had. He's a guy that likes to play through the middle, low mistake football, and I think that's probably the biggest mistake Queensland made last night. Is they played right into that style of football that Michael Maguire kind of thrives on, and he's built a team that can really win that battle through the middle of the field with some class players who, once you do that, take advantage of it. And I think Queensland played right into his sort of game plan last night, and I think that's probably why we got away with that game in the end. So I think it's perfect for him because he can select the squad that he wants, that suits the style of football he wants to play, and he doesn't have to get through 1, 2, 3 years with a squad, because I think over that time he tends to burn players out a little bit.
If I can just throw back to our favourite Tales of Tiger Town, just talking about Madge, I remember when that series started, people posting on social media who weren't even Tigers fans saying after the first episode, I would run through walls for Madge, the way he was talking to the boys in the sheds and hyping them up. And you're spot on, Gary. And I was thinking exactly the same thing today, reading a few things on X and news articles too about the game, is he's so intense. I think Origin is right in his wheelhouse. Like, it's perfect for him.
You think, Gary, I get the feeling he still wants to be a club coach, because, I mean, that's what I saw an interview tonight. He said, I'm a coach by nature and there's only 3 games. So I get the feeling clubs will come calling. I know we're not going to come calling. We've been there and done that. But Nick, just before I ask Gary, where did you sit on Madge when we sacked him? Did you think he'd had his turn 3.5 years, or did you think it was, again, more the fact that the clubs failed rather than Madge failed?
I thought I didn't mind Madge, to be honest, but I just don't think we had the right cattle for him, to be honest. And I was listening to what was it on? I was listening to an interview with Madge yesterday, and it might have been Matty John's podcast or something like that, but he was talking about different experiences over his coaching career, whether it be at club level or representative level with, international, and the differences. And he said, it's all very different. He said the thing with club football is you've really just got to deal with what you've got when you walk in the door. And I feel like that's what he had when he was at West Tigers. It'd be really nice to go out and handpick all these, big props and second rowers that bust the line like we saw last night, but we just don't have it.
A lot of the time, Gary, when I talk about Madge to you, I'm trying to wind you up, but do you wonder a little bit, like, I know he was trending in the wrong direction, and I probably called at the time, said it was the right decision. I wasn't as strong as Declan on it, who was trying to get him out since, round 1, 2020.
I think since he signed, Declan was trying to get rid of him.
He and
Luke Brooks.
How he would have gone with Appy and Bateman and Clemmer and Papali'i, who hasn't fired a shot since he's been here. And now Luai, he obviously gets on well with Luai. Do you sort of wonder whether he could have turned it around?
I think we would have needed to change that forward pack a little bit more. He really does need that big dominant forward through the middle, and we don't have that. And maybe under Madge, Steph could have become that, but he's not showing signs of being that. And maybe with a little bit more time, he could have brought in the right players to turn the squad over. But the fact is, we're going backwards every year that he was here. He had re-signed a lot of those players. There was a lot of talk that it wasn't his squad, but after 3 years, you've got a fair bit of your fingerprints over that squad. And I don't think as I said earlier, my biggest knock is the squad has to change to meet his coaching style. He can't change to meet the playing style of the players, and I didn't see that changing at our club. And yeah, so I don't think it would have gotten any better. And I do think part of where we are now, I think he started that trend of that dip down to where we ended up. So just because you leave doesn't mean the issues that you cause at the club are magically all someone else's fault. I think he put us in a position where we're starting to go down the ladder towards this point, and it's taken longer than I would have liked for us to rebound from that. But I don't think you can absolve him of all of the blame for where we ended up.
I was happy for him last night. I thought perfect job. I think he got a lot of his selections right, Nick. Like that's the one thing that like he took a few punts, like he didn't pick Appy. Some Tigers fans critical of that, but you can't say, Reece Robson or Lomax or Moses or any of those guys, even Dylan Edwards. I thought that was an obvious one, but I think if we had Freddie in charge, he wouldn't have made some of those bold sort of calls.
No, I agree. How good was Lomax across the series? He was brilliant. And all the stories that he didn't want to play wing, well, what a winger he's turned out to be. And like you just said as well, Appy not being picked, I think we're all a bit disappointed for Appy that he wasn't in the team somewhere. But Robson was tough last night. He tried a couple of show and goes, which I thought was funny because he just doesn't have the finesse of Appy or the speed. But he was very tough. Nuggety, that real Madge sort of build in a team where he just wants to drive up the middle and be physical. So well done, Madge. And like you said, I was so happy for him at the end when all the Blues players were in the middle of the field with the trophy, jumping up and down. Madge in the back right-hand corner, he had the biggest grin on his face. He looked like a 5-year-old with not much hair left.
Well, Billy Slater looked completely opposite. I don't know, Gary, if you saw his press comments, but he looked like he'd had a stroke, like his face has just dropped. He looked like he'd been crying for about 7 weeks. I actually think, Madge, I know you can't do it if you're a club coach, but I actually think he got in his head with that glass houses comment. I think he threw him off and he was miserable. Like, I was a huge fan of Billy Slater, but the last...
that's what I was about to say.
He put him off. No?
Billy Slater was basically your go-to for every single comment for the past 6 months. You've kind of brushed him now?
I'm not brushed him, but I sort of maybe wouldn't sign him for 10 years to coach the Tigers based on what I saw in the last few weeks.
Which you would have given him a lifetime contract at the start of the year. So, I do think Madge got to him, and I think it's the first time. Like, you got to remember, Billy Slater's not an experienced coach either. I think it's the first time he's had that real adversity and the media kind of coming at him because Madge is making these comments. I think it's the first time he's ever really had to deal with that. And you got to remember, a 3-game series, it's got to be intense for coaches as well. I don't think he handled that real well this year. But he'll learn from that, and I think he'll come back a better coach next year. And hopefully we get a series of similar intensity to that last game. Imagine 3 games of that sort of intensity. It turns it into it puts Origin back to that pinnacle that it always has been.
Gary, I'll start with you this one. Jarome Luai is a circuit breaker for this club in terms of getting away from the bottom of the table, buy or sell.
I think he's definitely going to come in and drive the standards, and I'm very hopeful next year that is not a wooden spoon year. So I think we're going to.
You didn't buy it because when I asked you that, then you sort of danced around it a little bit. You like him, but he needs more. Is that what you're saying?
I think he needs a little bit more support to turn us into a top 8 side. I will buy it. I think he's going to be a difference maker at our club and a big difference maker. And the thing for me is we talk about attention to detail, and Steve brings it up all the time. I think he's the guy that's going to drive attention to detail. He's the guy that's going to drive those standards at our club, and that's what's going to start to make a difference. And I know Appy's come in, and we've all spoken about his effort and how well he leads our club. Appy's not a guy that really leads by voice. Appy's a guy that leads by example. So he goes out there and he plays 100% full-hearted every week. But I don't know that he's necessarily the guy that's going to pick up the other guys who aren't doing that. One thing we know about Jarome Luai is he's the guy that's going to hold others to his really high standards. And I think That's the circuit breaker. That's the difference he's going to make to our club.
I'll go back to the Mitchell Pearce when I was listening to him, and he was talking about the Bulldogs, and he said by rights they should be in the bottom four with their roster, but he goes, he thinks it's amazing how much difference he thought one or two guys could make to the standards of a football club. And he was talking about Stephen Crichton and what he's sort of done there, and I was sort of getting a little bit hopeful.
Class, mate. That guy's class.
I was just getting hopeful because, like Gary said, I think Luai's got an aura and a presence about him that Appy sort of doesn't have. And yes, Appy's been a good captain and has played his best and tried his heart out, but it hasn't turned around. But I think Luai could have a little bit more maybe influence in terms of just maybe holding some guys accountable. He won't be afraid to have his say, you know.
If I can just add to, remember back to the start of last season when Appy, first walked in or ran onto the field for our first few games, and our team really in attack had no idea what Appy was doing. He would dart out a dummy half, no one was going with him, and he'd look around after making a 6-7 meter run, and there was no one running off him. And it took a good half to 2/3 of the year last year for our team to start to wake up. This is how Appy plays. This is how he wants to play, fast and direct and zippy. Then this year we've seen a little bit of improvement around there. We've seen a lot of players running up with him, and at times we've looked a lot better in attack. We've been able to get up the field and look a little bit more dangerous. We might not have been as polished as what we'd like to see at the moment, but we're getting there. And my thoughts are with Luai, he's in a way very similar to Appy. He's very quick, he's agile, he darts around the defensive line when he's got the ball in his hands, very evasive and elusive. I think with him and Appy, that's just going to double. Well, obviously, it's going to double that spark, throwing Luai into the equation. But I think it's just going to add that X factor what you're talking about, Eddie. I can't wait for next year. I really do think he's the circuit breaker that we need. And even the way he was up in Cherry Evans' face last night, how good was that to see? We need someone like that on the field because that's going to drag all of our other younger players up with him too.
I was going to say, I think Steve mentioned it last night, Nick. Even though he's still chief antagonizer, and I love that about him, he's not. He looks like he's matured in the last year with his football. Like he's not ending up, I know he was baiting the crowd a bit after the game, but the quality of his game, that looks like his number one focus at the moment.
I agree. I think he's come a long way since his first Origin appearance. Was that 2 years ago now as well?
10 Origins, Gary.
Yeah. And look, I thought he was all class last night. I know he was baiting the Queensland players, but that's the level where you want that to be happening. I agree. He's matured out of sight. A lot of those comments after games directed at fans that he's made after Origin games in the past, I don't think you see him carrying on like that now. I don't think you see a go. Well, we might next year. Maybe he'll tell us all we've got to go to work on Monday.
I think the one you're referring to, Gary, is a couple of years ago. He told people you got to get up to go to work or something. Last night he posted a picture of himself outside
the Caxton,
just in a prayer emoji saying good night. I thought that was very, very clever.
Yeah, I thought it was too, and I also liked Toto going through the airport this morning in full kit through Brisbane Airport.
I don't know if I would want to be sitting next to him on the plane if that was his playing kit.
It looked like it may have been his playing kit. So, look, I do like that side of it. If you win, you get to have that fun. It's how he's going to deal with losses, because I think he has shown that comment he made a couple of years ago is that he hasn't handled losing that well in the past. And no matter what, he's not going to be at a side next year that wins the majority of the games like he has at Penrith. So it is something he's going to have to be better at. He can't be getting his club fans offside the way he got the New South Wales fans offside. So that's something he's going to have to do better at our club. But I do see him being that guy who's going to drive us forward. So that's what I'm most excited about. I think he's going to make that transition to halfback. I think he's shown over the past month that he does have the skills to do that. But I also think the way he's going to drive us off the field and the way I speak about a half being responsible for making players around them better. I think that's what he's going to do. I think a lot of the players at our club, they're going to be better players because they're playing alongside and training alongside a guy like Jerome Luai.
It surprised me, Gary, that I've been watching him close this year, and I wasn't that impressed at 5'8" because I just thought it was often left foot step, turn inside, and I thought Nathan's doing all the organising, but he has genuinely shocked me when he's played at halfback. Not necessarily referring to last night's game, but his kicking game was excellent last night with his left foot, and that'll be an advantage next year if we have a right foot kicker with Galvin on the right. But it's given me a lot more hope that he can transition to a halfback role because he is going to be the dominant voice and the dominant playmaker here.
So the big thing for me earlier in the season, and it's the same thing I said to you every time you raise that, is Penrith had shoeboxed him. They'd given him that small little roll down that left edge, and that was his role. That was it. You wait for the ball to come to you, and then you do what you do on that left edge. That was it. And though Penrith's a little bit of a different team because even when Nathan Cleary's there, a lot of the organisation is still done by SIU. But he does a lot of that organisation for Penrith. And even now, I would say for a lot of Penrith games, he's in that halfback role despite playing in the 13. So he's that first receiver. He's the guy dishing it out. And even when Nathan's there, he does a lot of that. So when you have Nathan and Yeo, so you have Cleary and Yeo in that same team, then what is there left for Jerome Luai to do on that left edge? Because you got your 13 playing as a halfback and so you've already got two halfbacks in the side, and that doesn't leave a lot of room for Jerome. And I think that's a big reason why he's decided to make the move away from Penrith. And those comments about wanting to be Batman and not Robin is at Penrith, he was shoeboxed on that left-hand side. At our club, he's not going to be shoeboxed. And I wouldn't be surprised if he gets to play both sides of the ruck under Benji Marshall, and you see him popping up on the right-hand side as well. That's what I kind of expect to see. I think he's going to be that guy when he calls the ball at the West Tigers, the ball goes to him. That doesn't necessarily happen at Penrith even now. So even though he's been great the last, 2 months of football playing in that halfback role, he's still not first receiver quite a lot of the time. Now, at the West Tigers, anytime he wants that ball, that's where that ball is going to go. And I think that's going to be the making of Jerome Luai. I think that's why we're going to see a different player to what we've even seen from Penrith in the last 2 months. Is he is going to be that number one man in our side, and he's never really been that. Like, he was great last night, played great football, great kicking game. Those short dropouts were excellent last night. But he's still, even in that side last night, he still wasn't that number one man. With Nathan Cleary out at Penrith, he still hasn't been that dominant number one player. And I think he's going to thrive on that opportunity once he gets that next year.
Not that I really care, but it's going to be interesting to see how Luai plays the rest of the year with Nathan Cleary back in that Penrith team.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see if they just put him back onto that left edge, which he's leaving next year. I can't really blame them if they do. So if he ends up just going back to that small role, I do kind of understand that from both points of view. Whether he's what you do find with him is I think he's willing to, in that team, play his role. He knows what his role is. He's told what his role is. I think he goes out and does that most weeks, and he's had an expanded role while Cleary's been out. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him go back to just having that little left edge to control, and the other guys run the side, and he does what he does when the ball comes to him. Because in that side, that's a great role for him to play, and it's probably his best chance of getting a fourth premiership at the end of this year by doing that. But that's not what we're going to see next year. And that's why I've been a little bullish on, I think he'll make that transition, because I just don't think he's really been asked to do that role that we're going to be looking for him to do before.
2 to go. Nick, Stefano will end up staying at the West Tigers, buy or sell?
Oh, I'd like to say sell, but might use one of your holds.
Hey, sell.
Gutless.
You want him
Gutless.
Did you say gutless, Karen?
He said hold. He's going to hold it. He's not going to make a decision.
I thought you were calling Stefano gutless there.
No, Nick.
No, he's calling me gutless. He usually messages me and calls me gutless wonder all the time, but that's fine. I'm used to Gary now. It's all good.
Yeah, just a message when you wake up of a morning. Hey, gutless.
Gary, good morning, gutless. Yeah, that's right. I have a feeling, well, if you had have asked me a few weeks ago, I thought Stefano was already out the door. But I wonder if he's running out of options. And he certainly hasn't done himself any favours in the last few weeks. And unless he pulls his finger out, he's not going to get that $1 million check or whatever he's after at a Premier club. I can't see it happening.
I've asked the other guys this, Nick, and I haven't had a chance to ask you. Are you happy with him on 800,000 with what he's shown this year?
It's money for potential. And we saw some potential against the Raiders. How good was he when he was ragdolling defenders? I loved seeing that. And yes, then he was an $800,000 player. But from what he's put out across the rest of the rounds this year, no, he's not.
But doesn't an $800,000 a year player have to do that every week?
Yeah, 100%. Because he's one of the highest paid players in the club. So you have to be performing at that top level. So you got to get out of him. So is he worth it? But what annoys me, he's probably a prime example of the player that will end up at Melbourne, and he'll do that every week because Bellamy will drill it into him. You're doing this or you're playing reserve grade, or you're doing this or I'm releasing you, sending you elsewhere. That's what's going to drive you nuts.
But also, if he goes to Melbourne, he's not going to be that probably number one forward, where if you're paying a guy 800,000 at the West Tigers, you need him to be your number one forward. And especially the last month, Pole's outshone him massively in the last month. Sam Fainu has outshone him in the last month. These are the guys who are leading our pack at the moment, and two of the more inexperienced forwards in our team, and they're our pack leaders at the moment. And Steph doesn't have a huge amount more experience than him, but if he's asking for 800,000, then he needs to be outshining these guys every single week. Not a guy who's in his first full season of first grade, and a guy who we've swapped from lock to prop for the last 2 years so much that he hasn't been able to cement down a position. These are guys that Stefano should be leading in. I think they're doing a better job of that at the moment than he is.
Do you think Steph's a bit mentally shot?
I thought Steve made some good points on the previous pod where, like, I don't think he's out there dogging it. Usually, you know, when Moses left last time, Nick, he dogged that last couple of games to get out. I don't think Steph's out there dogging it because there's no value in him doing that. Like, I just think mentally this has all got to him. And I actually made the point to Gary. Don't know if he disagreed or just ignored me, but I think teams are going after him verbally in the last couple of games. I've been watching a couple of games I was at, and when he's, you know, they gang tackle him and there's 2 or 3 guys yelling abuse. Definitely where Rhea Hargraves was when we played the Roosters. And I just think that's part of the that's part of it at the moment that he's probably struggling with. I don't think he's going out there trying to play badly. I just think this has all got it a little bit too much for him at the moment. So
you're probably spot on there. And Stefano would be known as our pack leader to other clubs too. So he is the leader of the West Tigers forward pack. And if they can get on top of Stefano, then, you know, you're going to get on top of our pack. So you're right.
Last one, Gary. Tigers can avoid the spoon now that Mitchell Moses is out for the year. Buy or sell?
I'm
not down that last game, I reckon.
It quite possibly could. I'm going to sell that. I'm going to hope I'm wrong. But if the effort that we saw last weekend continues, we won't win another game. And we need to win more games to avoid that wooden spoon. So, yeah, I'm going to sell it for...
We need to win at least one, Gary. We need to win at least one.
That's right. I can't see that at the moment. Not on what we showed last week.
Okay. All right. Let's preview the game against South, boys. Do you want to talk, Gary? Because I know there's an ambush function at Gosford this Saturday at 12:30. I believe they've got Chris Heighington coming along.
We do have Chris Heighington coming along. So as long as I make it up there, I've broken my foot. So as long as I get a chance to get up to Gosford, I'll be interviewing Chris Heighington on stage at the Settlers Tavern at Gosford from 12:30. So if you're heading up to Gosford on the weekend, get up there a little bit early. There's a bunch of us, not me, because as I said, I've got a broken foot. I'll be driving up, but there's a bunch of us. We're catching the train up from Central Station or from Stratford Station on Saturday. So I think they're going about 10:30, 10:35 train or something it is. If you're interested in going up with the guys, jump on that train. And yeah, from 12:30, we'll have Chris Heighington up on stage having a little bit of a chat. And I might even ask him, mate, whether we should keep him as assistant coach or we should get rid of him as well for you, Eddie.
I was going to say, Gary, did you break your foot because of all your predictions of ending up on the floor?
Yeah, I kicked the dog when after our game last weekend. That unhappy.
Nick, good record at Gosford. I don't know if you've been up there. I've been up there probably in the 2010s and saw a couple of really good games there. We're 4 from 7 there. We have lost 7 of our last 8 against South. Random question though. Do you still consider South our biggest rival as a fan, just personally?
Uh, I've got a couple of good mates that are Rabbitohs fans, and I've copped it over the years, as we all have from specific or certain people, I
You
suppose.
don't make friends with South Sydney supporters, mate. Like, it's your
I
own
know.
fault.
I know. You know what? They're both Sydney boys, and one of them actually supports Queensland. It does my head in. I can't stand people like that, but they've obviously got some screws loose, but that's okay. They're Rabbitohs fans. Yeah, they probably are our biggest rival. It would be great to see a win. I know. I think the Rabbitohs have got a couple of outs this week. Is Cam Murray suspended? I think he's up for. Yeah, so he's it. That's really good. I'm still worried about Cody Walker. He's, despite his age, he's still such a crafty half. He can, pull a rabbit out of a hat. There you go. He's a rabbit. At the drop of a hat. Jack Whiten as well. Such a big, strong ball runner. And then you've still got Damien Cook. Dummy half, and he's still got his speed despite his, aging years. He's still pretty quick around the middle. So, if we're not in our game, they can carve us up pretty quickly. So I'm a bit nervous, but I'm always nervous.
Gary, I guess I was going to say no surprises, like the lack of changes, even though you got flogged. But were you disappointed when you saw that side on Tuesday? It looks like the only guys that are going out are the guys that got injured, which was Alex Lobb, Appy, and Alex Seyfarth's out with concussion. No one's actually been dropped or made accountable for that performance. Is that acceptable? Although it is a trick that coaches often use, saying, well, you were that bad, I'm going to give you all a chance at redemption this week.
The hardest thing for me is the guys that I'd like to see drop. You can't drop them because there's no replacement. Like, I was really disappointed in some of Adam Douei's efforts on the weekend. I thought his lack of effort when chasing down line breaks was disgusting. Like, one of the poorest efforts I've ever seen from a football player when chasing down line breaks. Even on line breaks where he missed the tackle, just jogging along behind is not acceptable and is not good enough. And most weeks I'd be calling for him to be dropped, but who do you put into that centre role if you're going to drop him? So that's the issue, is there's just not enough depth there that we can make those genuine changes. The one thing I will say, though, is we won those 2 games recently when we had the youngest side ever fielded in the NRL. And I don't think some of those guys, and it's good to see the young winger, sorry, I've forgotten his name.
Luke Lilly.
Luke Lilly, yeah. It's good to see him get another shot because I thought he was excellent in those games that he played and we won. But there's a couple other guys who probably deserve to get another go. And the fact that we're keeping some experienced guys who have been performing poorly over them is probably a little bit disappointing when we've seen, like we've been speaking about the youth being the future of this club. We played 2 games with the youngest side ever in the NRL, Richo was saying, and it won 2 games. And since we've brought the experience in, we've seen a lack of effort and a lack of competing in games. And for me, that's probably a little bit of an issue. So I wouldn't mind seeing a couple more of the young guys get a go. But it's really good to see Latu Fainu actually in line to
I mean,
play
it's
this
good to see him there, Gary, and you're right, it's young.
But he's going to play at a hooker. So
the thing, like, he has shown absolutely nothing playing 15 minutes at hooker. Is that going to be put Caesar on the bench?
Yeah, I do think that's a little bit of an issue.
We just
that's right. I'm still here. I was going to say the same thing too. Latu Fainu, I know he's had a lot of hammy issues over the season, which has been a shame for him, what he can show. But yeah, playing him on the bench, bring him on a hooker, I don't think it's doing him or us any favours. I would love to see him get a start in a half. So I've only seen highlights from reserve grade. I haven't been out to many games. And I know he set up a few tries, had his hands on the ball a fair bit, but I'd love to see him in the top in the top league alongside Galvin, just for a change. I don't know if the two of them have played together. That'd be another interesting combination to have a look at too. But I don't know what his future is at the club, because what do we do when Luai arrives? Unless Galvin can go into lock which has been suggested, or back row somewhere, which he's at the moment he's too young and too slight. I just don't see how Latu Fainu can fit into our 17.
Well, for me, where he fits in is I think there's a strong chance that Galvin doesn't remain at the club long term. So I think at some point there's a fair chance he becomes that option of being that in that 5'8" role. Depending on if what Galvin decides to do after this. So I think it's really important we keep him engaged in the club and he sees that future at the club, because I think he's that backup if something happens with Galvin. And I do think at some point Galvin has the potential to move into that lock role. And Latu's not a small guy either. Like, when you have a look at his brothers are quite big. So he probably has an option of filling that lock spot as well. So I think there is a way to keep them all in the side. I just don't really like having Latu playing in that hooker role. I think it would be better to get him some time in the halves. And I'm not a huge fan of playing Latu and Galvin together in the halves. I have nightmares still from us having Brooks and Moses there, and I think that really affected their development. But maybe as a short-term thing for the rest of the year to kind of give them both a little bit of a shot, it might not be a bad idea, because we know we've got an experienced half coming next year to kind of guide them.
I think next year is going to be telling. It's going to be huge, right? Because if Luai arrives and we start firing and win as many games as we've lost midway through the season and Galvin's happy, there's every chance that he'll stay. If we're 0 from 8 or we're 2 from 10 or whatever it might be and struggling, there's a good chance that Galvin's going to say, you know what, I'll take that deal at the Roosters and I'll go and play for success. So next year is going to be huge.
Boys, prediction time, Gary. I'm going to go, I think it'll be close because they're missing Latrell and Cam Murray, who are their two best players, and I think we will come out with a bit of an ambush sort of mentality. But I just don't know. South's got a lot of points in. I'm going to go 34-28 South.
You think we're going to get the 28 points?
Yep.
Look, I think South will get away with the win, and it's not
South
very
don't
often.
tackle that well, Gary.
But yeah, they don't. But we haven't, for a big parts of the season, we haven't attacked real well. And look, I'm going to give South the win. I'll agree with you 34. But I'm going to have us more around 18.
Nick?
You know what? I'm a realist, and I haven't.
No, you're negative is the word. Negative.
You could call me negative. I'm a negative realist. I haven't picked the Tigers in my tipping comp. I don't think we can win only based off recent form, but I'll have to say South 26-24, and Adam Doueihi to miss a conversion from the sideline to draw it up right on the 80th minute. Sorry, Adam.
Have you got a prediction for how many tackles he misses?
About 42.
Gary back on the Adam Doueihi hate train. Quiz time, boys. Question 1. It's a multiple choice. In which English Midland city did Lottie Dakiri play rugby union prior to joining the West Tigers? Was it A, Nottingham, B, Leicester, C, Derby, or D, Birmingham? Gary?
It was Leicester.
Correct, I agree. Leicester.
Nodding along, it was the Leicester Tigers. Made 16 appearances for them in 2009-10, scoring a grand total of 3 tries. He probably caught a cold, probably didn't get the ball. No. Question 2, true or false? Nick, we have won 17 of our 42 games against South with an overall point differential of -3. True or false?
True.
It's false.
It's true. Rabbitohs have scored 985 points to our 982. Question number 3. How many times, I think this is the nearest to the pin, yeah it is. How many times did the West Tigers concede 50 points or more in a game from the start of 2006 to the end of 2009? So that's a 4-year spell right after we won the premiership. How many times, Gary, did we concede 50 or more?
Once.
Nick?
Twice.
No, it was duck egg. 4 years without a 50 against us. So it was 48 apparently against the Broncos and Seagulls. Question number 4. From our inception to present, there have been 15 different field goal kickers for the joint venture. Name 7 of them who kicked a solitary one, being one? You think of any boys who've just kicked one field goal for the club? Might have been a winning field goal, or there was one winning field goal early this year, from Mr. Left Foot Kicker, halfback against Parramatta.
Did Caesar kick that, did he?
Yeah,
there you go. Was Jackson Hastings one of those?
Yeah, Jackson Hastings. I was looking down the list, see if he was there.
I reckon Brooksy's kicked more than one.
Yeah,
Brooksy kicked more than one.
Definitely kicked more than one. The other names on there, Johnny Morris, Robert Louis, Jacob Miller, John Simon, and Kevin McGuinness. Last question.
There you go.
Who am I? And you're not going to get this one because he's not a very well-known West Tigers player.
Come on, give Nick a chance. Nick's a very bright man.
Position he played. I was born in Wollongong in 1985. I debuted for the Rabbitohs in 2004, appearing twice. Joined the West Tigers for seasons 2008 and 2009. I played 19 games and I scored 4 tries. Often played as a backline utility. I mean, he would have been Tim Sheen's favourite player if he was a backline utility. I replaced an injured Bo Ryan on the wing in our last 2 games of 2009. From 2010 to the end of my career in 2018, I went on to play 204 Super League matches. My surname rhymes with a fruit. That's an interesting last cue. No guesses, boys? I wouldn't know.
It doesn't rhyme with orange because nothing rhymes with orange.
It rhymes with cranberry.
Reece Hambry.
Yeah, Reece Hambry. Can't say I remember him playing 19 games for the club, but I mean we've had so many games, Gary, that I've forgotten. So Western Suburbs Reds Devils Junior, blah blah blah. So that is Yachty's quiz. I'll have to get someone. Gary, you often like to listen to the replay of yourself talking, so you can go through and tell me who won the quiz because I've got no idea.
All I can say is Nick is much better at the quiz than Steve is. Much better.
I gave Steve
much better at the quiz than Steve.
New role of hosting the quiz, so he didn't have to embarrass himself by knowing.
Man, that was just to get over his whinging about not being able to answer any questions.
Right, boys, that's been it's been good tonight. I think we've gone for just over an hour. So Sunday night,
we didn't hit the 2-hour mark.
I don't know about these Saturday night pods. I don't think they're going to catch on with me, Gary, that Joel did last week.
No, you're not home of a Saturday night, are you?
Often texting you, abusing you after a few bourbon.
Yeah, usually about 2 o'clock in the morning I start getting messages from Eddie.
All right, boys, let's hope for a win on the weekend. Good luck with the ambush function, Gary, and thank you, boys.
Thanks, Eddie. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, guys.